Hi, so I'm Cammy Peterson, the manager of the Clean Energy Division here at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Just want to welcome you all again to the Streamlining the Solar Permitting Process and Developing Supportive Zoning Bylaws webinar. We're really glad you could be with us today. And I thought it would be helpful to give a little bit of a background on Metropolitan Area Planning Council. We are, as many of you know, but some might not be familiar, the regional planning agency for the greater Boston area. So we represent and serve the 101 cities and towns of Metro Boston. And really kind of you can see on this map within the 495 arc all around the city of Boston and including the city of Boston. So we really represent about half the population of the state and look through a number of functions, more traditional land use planning, economic development, transportation, but also public health, homeland security, municipal collaboration, and clean energy, for instance. Many ways to serve all of our communities, both policy and planning. More about the clean energy programs here at MAPC. We work both at a regional and a local level. Some of you might have heard on the regional level of our collective procurement projects. We've done a good number of these and engaged a good number of our communities, even some outside of our region at times, on deep energy municipal retrofits, or deep retrofits of energy efficiency at the municipal level. Regional solar initiative, which is looking to implement rooftop, landfill, parking canopy solar in municipalities around our region. LED streetlight purchasing program, which many of our cities and towns have been involved in. Looking now too, and this is here on the page under number 3, energy technical assistance, but at possibly doing procurements in the near future on community electricity aggregation for the brokers. We're going to be dealing more with resiliency and preparedness, possibly from that regional level as well going forward, and we're always looking at ways to regionalize and create economies of scale for products and services for our communities. But we also work at the local level, with a particular city or town on planning for their energy action into the future, looking at what they've done in the past through baselining, connecting them, plug-and-play programs the utilities might hold, utility and state incentives, helping them to apply for green communities and other types of technical assistance, other grants, working on their data, working on increasing their capacities. And lastly, we house a lot of information on our website as well, and that brings me to our Clean Energy Toolkit. So you'll see here our website for the Clean Energy Division, and from there you can find our toolkit, and these are the headers of a number of different types of toolkits. So within each of these, there's a large number of toolkits that you can find. And these are really concise, direct, clear how-to guides on how to take action in a number of ways, whether it's working on a procurement through Chapter 25A, whether it's looking to share an energy manager, whether it's looking to increase the efficiency in your municipal facilities, find funding through a number of different ways. We've put together these how-to guides that are, like I said, brief and concise and clear to help communities to move in this direction and provide that support. And our most recent toolkit is this new solar permitting and zoning toolkit that we've announced first at our workshop that we had on this topic back in January before the onslaught of snow, and are now leading this webinar to talk more about. So that's our Streamlining the Solar Permitting Process and Developing Supportive Zoning Bylaws toolkit. And like I said, we held that workshop back in January. Many of you might have attended that. This is meant sort of to reintroduce the topic, to be able to release and announce this information again. And we weren't able to be joined at that point by Emma Krause, who's joining us today from the Department of Energy Resources, because at the last minute she was overtaken by the flu, and so we were sad to miss her. At that workshop, we were thankfully joined by the city of Cambridge and the town of Framingham. Cambridge is here again today, but wanted to have the opportunity to really discuss a lot of these issues with you again. So thank you to Emma for joining us today, and for Meghan Shaw from the city of Cambridge, so we could really dive into this again for those who couldn't make the previous workshop or wanted to have another chance to look at the material. So why did we choose this topic for our most recent toolkit? And really the biggest reason is because the largest challenge right now, the largest hurdle to implementing solar in Massachusetts is often those soft costs. Things like zoning and permitting and interconnection, and how inspectors come to look at things. Those parts that are not the hard costs, the hardware, they're not the panels. The price of panels have come down a great deal. They're not the inverters or the other parts that are the hardware of a solar installation. It's a very low-cost way to promote solar, is by really attacking these soft costs and finding a way to streamline and shorten the timeline of a lot of these policies that are in place. It's time and money is what it really comes down to. You can see the numbers here from NREL, and right now soft costs nationally account for 64% of the residential cost of installing solar. That's huge. It's almost 2/3, and over half are both small and large commercial. And you can also see that permitting ranges greatly from no money at all to over $2,500. And it's that inconsistency and diversity across not just states, but town to town, city to city, across municipalities that could be neighboring one another and have vastly different policies. And so finding ways not only to streamline and shorten these permitting processes and zoning that's on the books, but finding ways to create consistency across borders. It might not be the exact same. We here in Massachusetts are very clear about liking our autonomy on a municipal basis and to have control over our own policies and programs as much as we can. But if we can look to approach things regionally and consistently, that can bring down a lot of the soft costs, a lot of the time and money and opportunity costs that are lost, especially from that installer, developer, construction side, who then doesn't have to deal with completely different types of policies and processes across the street because they're in a different town. Sorry, it took a minute for that slide to advance, but here we are just looking again at the good work the Department of Energy Resources is doing, and Emma will talk more about this, but what really kickstarted a lot of the policies on solar zoning here in Massachusetts is the guidance provided by the Green Communities Act in looking for if a community wants to be designated as a green community. Both criterion 1 and 2 deal explicitly with facilitating a more streamlined process for zoning and for permitting. So you're requiring expedited permitting, criterion 2, requiring as of right. So there's no special or discretionary permitting that can go on in a community if they want to become a green community. But it has to be as of right, helps to remove a lot of these barriers. Very important. And so we wanted to, with the guidance that a lot of these communities have put out there, with the great, or communities I should say, with the agencies that put out there, both at the state and the federal level, with the Department of Energy, with academic institutions and NGOs, international institutions. There's a lot of material out there on how to tackle this type of issue, the permitting and the zoning and the soft costs, and really making the process to implement solar on that side easier. But there's so much information that it can be very overwhelming for cities and towns really to approach this. And even a lot of the guidance documents that are very specifically targeted to them can be just be quite large and quite a lot to take in. And so we wanted to distill down that information from all those different angles and really consolidate it and streamline it into this how-to toolkit, this guide, where we could say, this is why it's important, and these are the best practices we think for our cities and towns to undertake. Through doing all of that research, through talking to a lot of cities and towns and others who are on the regulating side as well. And so one of the first best practices that we really have put into this toolkit and that we think is an important first step for anyone looking to undertake this work is to audit what they're doing, to really take a look at what their permitting and zoning policies are and say, is this clear? If I were sitting down here today and as a developer, as a resident who wanted to put solar up, would I understand what I'm supposed to do? Is it, are there inconsistencies? Are there things that are confusing or unsaid? Is there a way to make this easier? And really kind of finding those gaps. Are things missing? Are things confusing? Or maybe it's pretty clear, but it's very onerous. Finding those things that can be done, from having an objective point of view when you sit down and look at it can be a really helpful start. And then, once you've done that audit, how can you fix it? What can you do to develop better bylaws or permitting processes, or how can you amend what you had? Setting those in place using the model documents that are out there, using what the communities around you have done, always having your council to review it as well, but making sure that you're doing what you can to expedite the process for both sides, so that your municipal staff too doesn't have to spend as much time and energy on it. And one really clear way to do that is just provide a checklist. It's one of the easiest things from all those that are going to participate on both sides, municipal staff and otherwise in the process, is to just, here's what we need you to do, and you can check it off as you go, and it's really going to reduce the errors and the inefficiencies that come on both sides. And likewise, if you can set a narrow inspection time window, that can make a big difference. In San Jose, they have 2-hour windows that are set, that are known, and that inspections occur within. And therefore, there's no lost opportunity costs or labor costs or people who just have to wait around and get frustrated, or inspectors whose days are out of control because there's no kind of set window to it. If a window is 8 hours long, you're going to have a lot of frustrated people on both sides. But if it's known within a narrow time frame, it can really go a long way. Also, a permitting website. Now, I know that this seems also obvious that it would be really helpful, but then on the other side, a lot of communities aren't there. They say, we don't have a website yet for our trash collection. We're not developing a permitting website. But when that capacity is there, when there's a way to do it, it can make a really big difference to have a dedicated place, a clearinghouse for those in your community to know how to get those most up-to-date resources, track the progress, understand what the process is. And again, it really helps on the municipal side too. These are now questions that your staff doesn't have to answer. It's a place for them to look if they have questions. They're filling in for someone or they're new to that position. It really can diminish the paper materials that you have to go through at your municipal offices, as well as just the time spent answering questions over the phone or in person. And the next step in that, Cambridge is doing a great job with that website. You see here what Boston is doing with their online permitting. If you can do that without having to travel to the permit office, and it's really clear, and you can see here the short time frame too. Short form building permit, turn around in 1 day. Long form is only 7 days. The more you can do online to eliminate those burdens of travel and ensure consistency in format and just make it more standardized, lessen the room for error, it's going to make a big difference on both ends, again, and how much solar you're facilitating. And lastly, best practice that we recommend is to explore options for permitting fees. They're a really significant part of the cost. They differ vastly between communities. It's a patchwork out there. It can be very confusing for contractors and developers, which is frustrating how different it is from one to the next. So you can get rid of it altogether, or if you're reliant on that revenue, you can look at capping it. So if a resident thinks, well, if I'm not going to pay more in permitting costs to put a bigger system on, and it would meet my needs better, I'll do that because I know I will pay no more than this capped permitting cost. Or if you tie it directly to the processing time with a really clear chart, base it on maybe the PV installer cost. I think it's the town of Canton that has created this transparent system where it's $50 plus 2% of the labor costs, and the inspector or the municipal staff determines a fair market value for what that labor cost would be. And it's a nice system where people know exactly what they're getting into, and it seems fairly tied to something that should affect what that permitting fee could be. So a range of options, but really kind of exploring how you treat permitting fees could be really useful. So I encourage you to take a look at our toolkit as well as really engage with the rest of our speakers today. Offline, call us at any time. Again, my name is Cammy Peterson, Manager of Clean Energy here. I know we'll have time for questions at the end also. Axum Tefera, who I'd like to thank again for putting this together, who's a great energy planner on my team here. We're always open for questions, as I know Emma and Meghan are as well. The town of Framingham, they participated in the workshop. They're a great resource, as are all of the other state and federal and national types of resources that are out there. And we have the end of our toolkit, for example, a great list of resources to dig into this deeper. So with that, I will say thank you.
Hello, my name is Emma Krause. I work at the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources, and today I will be speaking about some of the permitting and zoning resources we've put together recently as part of the Rooftop Solar Challenge program. So Rooftop Solar Challenge, what is it? It is a federal grant that is focused on reducing solar soft costs, and it's focused on 4 main areas: permitting, zoning, interconnection, and financing. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the permitting and zoning resources we've developed over the course of the grant. There's been 2 rounds, round 1 and round 2. In the first round, you can see below some of the pieces that we really focused on with some key partners. A lot of guidance work as well as developing tools for municipalities with permitting and zoning. So one of the key pieces we developed in round 1 was a large permitting guide, which essentially gave a lot of resources to municipalities when permitting for solar. You can see we did permit process, standard permit application, ways to fast track an application, design template package, what have you. And while there's a ton of resources there that are very effective, we did hear from municipalities that it might be more effective to develop specific key resources for local inspectors to use when focusing on permitting. So in the second round, we've tried to do that a little bit more, and I'll talk about that a little bit down the road. However, these resources we did develop. They are available on our website. I'll flash that link later on for folks to use for any sort of model permitting around solar. All the resources you see listed here are available as part of that larger permitting package on our website. Now we're in Rooftop Solar Challenge Round 2, and this time we're still focused on solar soft costs. We're still focused on permitting, zoning, interconnection, and financing. However, we're also working to increase coordination across New England. So we're working with Connecticut, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont, and we're coordinated by a national energy nonprofit called the Clean Energy States Alliance, and we form what's called the New England Solar Cost Reduction Partnership. Basically working to continue to streamline solar, perhaps even to do it a little bit across state borders because we know how much installers travel from state to state. And we also share best practices and try to encourage kind of similar soft cost reduction strategies in each state. We're also continuing Solarize Mass through the partnership with Mass Clean Energy Center and have similar municipal partners as in round 1 of Rooftop Solar Challenge. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about those kind of two key specific resources that we developed in round 2 of Rooftop Solar Challenge. The first is a prescriptive process, and this is a tool mainly for building inspectors. So it was developed as part of round 1, and you can see a link there for where to access it. And it's mainly a guideline for installing and approving rooftop residential systems. It allows the ability to possibly preclude the need for a licensed structural engineer to evaluate rooftop load carrying capacity. It applies to all cities and towns in Massachusetts, and it can be effective for about 10 to 12% of homes across the state. It was developed in conjunction with the Department of Public Safety and the Board of Building Regulation Standards, and again, it can be found at this link below. And I'll show you in the next slide kind of what it looks like and explain how it works. So you can see here the prescriptive process is it's a flow chart. And you can see if you're moving vertically down the flow chart and you meet the appropriate criteria, then you are able to potentially skip over the need for a structural engineer to come out and verify the roof load capacity. If you don't meet any of the criteria in the flow chart, then you have to move over to get the structural engineer to come in and take a look at your roof. However, we estimate that about 10 to 12% of homes in Massachusetts will meet this criteria and hopefully streamlining the process through there. So this is really a resource for building inspectors to be aware of that. It might not be necessary for a structural engineer to come out and ensure that the roof is adequate for solar. The second resource we developed is for electrical inspectors. This is basically a guidance document that's meant to supplement the uniform application for permit to perform electrical work. So it gives information on bylaw requirements and best practices and is meant to supplement that state electrical permitting document that's used for all electrical installations across the state. The goal is to ensure that solar PV systems are installed safely and they comply with Massachusetts electrical code requirements. So you can find this document again on our website. The link is there. And this is mainly a resource for electrical inspectors to use to also help to ensure that they're asking for the same thing from town to town. We also give a recommendation of sort of in addition to the electrical permit form, some three additional pieces of information that inspectors can ask for about the PV system, and this is to create some sort of uniformity for installers across the board, so they can kind of know what to accept. Again, it's a guidance document. It's not necessary that they have to use it, but we've gotten a lot of feedback from electrical inspectors that it's been very useful to have some kind of direction on solar PV as to sort of what to ask for and what's appropriate. Some other key pieces of doing this permitting work was stakeholder outreach. When developing that large permitting toolkit in round 1 of Rooftop Solar Challenge, we were in touch with 25 municipalities to learn essentially about their building and electrical permitting processes. And we getting in touch with those inspectors, talking to those different municipalities was very helpful through these different state agencies, as also reviewing our permitting guide and again permitting documents with them. It was very useful to ensure that we were on the right track. So then the electrical side, we spoke with the State Board of Electrical Examiners and the Board of Fire Prevention Regulators. On the building side, we spoke with the Department of Public Safety and the Board of Building Regulation Standards. And again, very helpful to engage these stakeholders and have them working with us through the process. Final piece of the permitting work was doing trainings on these materials. So we did 6 trainings across the state in person and 1 webinar on the the prescriptive process, so the resource for building inspectors, as well as the guidance document for electrical inspectors. And we gave kind of a technical and safety training on solar PV, and we also did an overview of these model documents and explanations of how they could be used. If anyone's interested in watching these trainings and kind of diving into this a little bit more, you can find the webinar at the link I've put up on the screen here. It also can be found through our Rooftop Solar Challenge page, but this is a direct link to where that webinar is, and it's up there for public consumption as well as the slides and handouts used during the presentation. The other key area that we focused on is zoning, and as part of round 1 and round 2, we put together model zoning and guidance for solar energy systems regulation. This was developed to really help communities establish solar energy regulations, and it addresses small, medium, large-scale roof and ground-mounted solar systems, so really covering the swath of solar options out there. The goal is to reflect statutory limits on the municipal ability to regulate solar energy systems. As you can see, Chapter 40A, Section 3 of Massachusetts General Law says that solar systems may not be prohibited or unreasonably regulated without defining reasonable. So this tries to get at that statutory limit a little bit. So we developed this model zoning bylaw, and we also developed a policy guidance to kind of explain the implications of the statutes and their significance to local zonings. As I said, it's established to assist cities and towns throughout Massachusetts in establishing reasonable standards to facilitate the development of small, medium, large-scale ground or roof-mounted systems. It assumes that the municipalities will have typical zoning sections that are already in place through local ordinances or bylaws, and that using our model bylaw, our model solar bylaw, these sections can be amended to better address solar, and you can see some of the sections outlined below. And then the policy guidance document we developed. This is a tool that's used mainly to summarize, explain, and really help communities apply the 4 statutes that apply to solar PV. So you can see all 4 of them laid out here and kind of what they speak to. The policy guidance also covers the use of specific techniques like solar mapping and shadow analysis, and how this might be helpful when developing bylaws. And it also speaks to the use of subdivision and other land use regulations that can complement solar zoning. And finally, it addresses the importance of outreach and education to citizens regarding solar energy. So just to reiterate how to use that model zoning bylaw, It's not, as I said, intended for adoption precisely as written. Communities are advised to consider how and where the language can be modified to suit local conditions, and also to be inserted into existing zoning bylaws and ordinances. We highly recommend that any language adopted from this model be reviewed by municipal council prior to adoption by a municipality. This is a slide to just kind of understand what it looks like and how to use it. So as we've said, it provides a framework for local zoning. And then next to these frameworks, there's blue commentary sections that highlight questions local decision makers should answer to tailor the model bylaw to their circumstances accordingly. And again, review your customized bylaw with your municipal legal counsel to ensure it is meeting municipal conditions accordingly. So what can local governments do in this process? A big piece of it is public education. Statutory provisions associated with solar energy are very unique to Massachusetts, so it's very helpful to start with outreach and education. This effort should really involve all zoning enforcement agents and permit granting authorities, and it's key to create a shared understanding of Massachusetts general laws, and also involve solar installers in the process because they have substantial knowledge about these systems and the installation process, and I think we feel really can provide a helpful context to the whole process. One venue that's really helpful for this sort of approach of large kind of stakeholder building and consensus is to develop or update any kind of municipal master plan. It can not only be used for future planning opportunities, but it can also provide a way to educate local stakeholders in both the public and the private sector regarding the unique regulatory framework in Massachusetts. Another way that might be effective also is to complete a municipal energy plan or potentially a green communities designation and grant program application, which requires interested municipalities to go through this sort of step. Just continuing on what else local governments can do. Another sort of way to go about this is auditing zoning bylaws or ordinances and then developing zoning amendments to regulate solar energy systems. You can see sort of, the four portions of zoning of local zoning we're looking for these bylaws to potentially be applied to. Auditing these portions for the purposes of amending individual existing sections may be a more practical and effective approach. If this is the way that municipalities are going to go, we encourage planners to closely review the full text of their zoning bylaw or ordinance to see which sections should be altered. And communities should also review design guidelines applicable to existing local historic districts. Again, seeing kind of what the current conditions are in a municipality and how they can be appropriately altered. So all this work as part of Rooftop Solar Challenge is being done under the Green Communities Division. As many of you know, Green Communities Division is the energy hub for all Massachusetts cities and towns, not just designated green communities. And as a result, these resources, though developed through Rooftop Solar Challenge, are available for all municipalities across the state. And any assistance with them can be provided by myself. I'm housed in the Green Communities Division, or are for regional coordinators whose contact information I'll put up. So as I said, for regional coordinators, you can see right here we have Springfield, Worcester, Northeast Regional Coordinator, and Southeast Regional Coordinator. They're here to provide information, to act as resources, and to answer any questions municipalities have about energy efficiency and renewable energy activities. And finally, I just wanted to give folks a heads up about some upcoming DOER solar resources. A couple things we're working on under Rooftop Solar Challenge 2, condominium guide for solar PV, as well as a financing guide for solar PV. The financing guide is based off of a guide done by the Clean Energy States Alliance, and we're working to tailor it specifically to Massachusetts. We're also looking at possible additional solar PV permitting and safety trainings for municipal inspectors and first responders. And we're also looking at doing possible outreach on online permitting and figuring out how we might be able to make that a little more prevalent throughout the state. So please stay tuned for all those resources and opportunities. And then finally, not a part of Rooftop Solar Challenge, but another solar resource that that DOER is very excited about. We're working with the Clean Energy Center on our residential solar loan program, and looking forward to have that launching later this year. And that's it. So as you can see, my email is there. I believe I'll be answering some of your questions later, and Axel will be asking me some of your questions. Looking forward to that. But if you have anything additional, please don't hesitate to email me. All the resources that I talked about today can be found on the Rooftop Solar Challenge website. You can see the link right there. And I'm looking forward to discussing more. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Megan Shaw, and I'm with the City of Cambridge's Community Development Department as part of the Cambridge Energy Alliance. The goal of the Cambridge Energy Alliance is to help residents and small businesses invest in renewable energy and energy efficiency. Today I'm going to be talking about our solar permitting guide and our solar map tool. The solar permitting guide was created several years ago with funding from the U.S. Department of Energy's Sunshot Grant. The goal was to provide clear information about the application and review procedures to obtain all the permits necessary to install a solar PV system on a residential building. It also provides some basic information about zoning considerations and other design elements that may require a solar contractor to obtain permission or other types of applications outside of the Inspectional Services Department. For example, it provides some information about Cambridge historical designated areas and working with the Historical Commission to get sign-off on a solar PV project on a historic building. The guide is organized around a checklist that allows the contractors to know upfront all the documents that they will need to have in front of them in order to walk through the online permitting process. This guide coincided with our Inspectional Services Department investing in an online permitting system, thereby expediting the permitting process simply by making it so that people did not have to apply for a permit in person during city business hours. The goal of having the checklist in the permitting guide was to allow contractors to be able to see what documents they needed before engaging with the online permitting system, and to hopefully avoid all solar contractors new to the city from having to call the Inspectional Service Department and each obtain an individual information about the documents needed. It also helps expedite the solar permitting process because the contractor can see all of the documents that they need to have signed or created in advance, thereby reducing the number of times that they have to loop back around to subcontractors, onto the residential system owner, or to the condo association if you're in a multi-family building and need a condo affidavit. In addition, the checklist provides some information about the permitting fees, which allows them to be calculated in advance by the contractor and put into their bids with the homeowner right from the start. In addition to providing a checklist of permit documentation, there's also some very basic guidelines around design considerations. These guidelines certainly do not replace detailed information that's found in our zoning documents or other outside information about installation that would include best practices. But it does provide some general information about when a project might fall outside of the traditional permit application process and need additional review by the Board of Zoning Appeals. As I mentioned, this permitting guide coincided with the Inspectional Services Department's use of a new online permit application system. Therefore, much of the guide is dedicated to screenshots and call-out boxes of important information that a solar contractor will need as they walk through the online permit webpage. This allows the contractors who may not be familiar with using online permitting to see the screens in advance, understand anything special, or clarify any confusing sections. For instance, if you select a building with 1 or 2 units or a building with multi, you will need an additional alteration or addition permit. That might not be clear in the online permitting system, but we're calling it out here. In addition, we also call out the cost of electrical permitting and outline exactly what what information is needed on each screen. The goal of the permitting guide is not only to make it easier for solar contractors to work in the city, but to create happy owners of solar who speak positively about their experience and feel that the city is not just encouraging solar, but actually working to make solar installations easy and affordable and stress-free. We feel that the more citizens that have great experiences with installing solars on their home, like David here, the more they'll tell their friends and neighbors and encourage more solar installations throughout the city. The next thing I wanted to talk about was our solar map tool. In some ways, this is actually something that is used way before someone is part of the solar permitting process in the city. It's basically a tool to encourage homeowners and business owners and building owners to actually evaluate their own individual roof for its solar potential. And it provides a good inspiration to show just how much of our city has good solar access. In addition, the tool allows people to upload existing systems. So it shows people in the city that there are lots of other solar installations that already exist and that they too can install solar PV for their property. One of the biggest questions that we get about solar is related to cost. And that's one of the things that this tool does very well, is allow people to really play around with the size of a PV system on their particular roof and understand the cost, the payback time, and how an investment in solar compares to other types of investment like the Dow Jones Industrial Average. You can find the Solar Map tool online by Googling Cambridge Solar Map or by visiting cambridgeenergyalliance.org or cambridgema.gov. I'm now going to switch over to a live demo of the tool to demonstrate some of its capabilities and generate a solar report that a homeowner could then use to reach out to a solar contractor about a potential solar installation on their own residential building. Thank you.